Peter made a motorcycle movie called Wild Angels, which was a big success. And Jack Nicholson had made one called Hell's Angels on Wheels. And I'd made one called The Glory Stompers. So Peter and I promised each other we wouldn't make a bike movie. We wanted to do anything but make a motorcycle movie because we were afraid that we were going to become the John Wayne and, Gabby Hayes of bike films.
I went to Toronto to promote the trip. So I was there on the first day of this big exhibition. Jack Valenti is up on this big table of bigwigs, and he's a new boy in the block. LBJ had just appointed him and just created the thing called the Motion Picture Association of America. And Jack's up there, this is his first public utterance. My friends, you're my friends, and looking right at me. We have to stop making movies about motorcycles, sex, and drugs, and make more movies like Dr. Dolittle. I went back to the Lakeshore Motel, smoked a couple of dibs, had some Heineken, sat down and began to sign photographs. I came upon one photograph from the Wild Angels. So the doobs and the Heine kicked right in, and I fell into the photograph. That's it. I know what to do for my next sex, motorcycles, and drugs movie. First thing I thought of was these two guys who had done this journey across America, and that they get bumped off by these guys who were poachers. I'd call Hopper. And it was about 4:30 in the morning.
He woke me up in the middle of the night and he said, what do you think of that idea? And I said, did they tell you they'd give you the money?
And I said, you direct, I'll produce, we'll both write, and we'll both act, we can save some money. Dennis said, you want me to direct? I knew that Dennis would be the perfect person to direct this film. And I wasn't wrong.
We'd gone through the whole 60s, and the 60s had been such a fascinating time, and there had been no movies made that had anything to do with our reality. I mean, the movie that was made the year that we made Easy Rider was Doris Day, and Rock Hudson made Pillow Talk. The young kind of movies that were being made for kids were Beach Blanket Bingo, with Frankie Avalon. They had very little to do with the reality of Haight-Ashbury or the reality of the hippie love-ins. So much was happening at that moment. The visual arts were exploding. The music was exploding. All these creative things that happened. And basically, this was tapping into the end of it. Pop art had already happened. Rock and roll had already happened. The summer of love was over.
I was in Roscoff in the west coast of France in 1967, shooting a film with Jane. One afternoon, I hear some scuffling on the stairs, and into my room walks Terry Southern, who had been in Rome looking at Barbarella that he had written for Jane and Vadim. Terry wanted to know, what are you doing? Told him the story of what Dennis and I were going up to. And Terry knew Dennis. Terry said, Den, huh? Well, what's your plan? I said, well, we really don't want to write it into a screenplay form. We're too impatient for it. So we want to find somebody who will just mechanically write it into screenplay form for us, and then we'll go out and shoot the film. Terry said, I'm your guy. I said, Terry, your fee is the budget of the film. Come on, give me a break. No, you don't understand, Peter. I'm your guy. We all got together and began to work it out. By the time we'd spent about 5 days together, we had it locked into a story that I recorded on tape, and it was transcribed and made out of 21 pages, and that's what we went back to Hollywood with.
So we went into Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider and our friends who had just made The Monkees and had this tremendous success. And Jack Nicholson was there because they were making Head, and that's how Jack fell into it also.
Rafelson said, it's the most commercial story I've ever heard. Well, how much do you want for this movie? I said, $360,000. I wasn't prepared for it. I just thought, well, that's how much it cost Corman to shoot The Wild Angels. I can do the same. No problem. I said, we ought to go to Mardi Gras because we'll have 100,000 people in costume. We won't have to pay for it. And Bert wrote us a check for $40,000 to go shoot Mardi Gras.
And Schneider said, this is your test. I'm giving you money to shoot this 16-millimeter thing. If this works, fine. If it doesn't, you're not going on with this picture.
There had been some confusion about when Mardi Gras actually took place. So they were caught, and they didn't have anything except a number of volunteers.
I had to suddenly jam and get friends with 16-millimeter cameras together to go and shoot in Mardi Gras, which is already a disastrous idea.
The night before they traveled to New Orleans, they had a meeting. People would say, gee, okay, we need a gaffer. Who wants to be a gaffer? And, somebody put, okay, you're the gaffer. And it was like that. It was just, oh, my God, this can't work. I mean, I wasn't that organized, but I was appalled. And they all thought they were the first cameramen. They all thought that.
We were all out of our minds. Half of us were on acid. We go to a meeting in a conference room. Dennis and Peter are sitting up there. He says, we got to be careful here because they know what we're doing. And I said, Dennis, who knows what we're doing? He said, the government. I said, the government? Well, why? What are we doing that they know? He said, they know that we're here to make this movie. And I said, well, how do they know what the movie's about? We don't have a fucking script. How the can they know that? He said, they know, man. Man, they know because of who we are. I said, who are we?
Seymour Cassell was one of the camera assistants. You know, this is great.
It was a nightmare. And I was so convinced that we had to do this right and so on. I was a maniac. I tell them nobody's to film anything unless I tell them to. And every time I look around, there's a guy shooting out the window. And again, because they all wanted to be directors. It was a nightmare.
It was a prison-like atmosphere. Dennis was quite afraid that we would get some idea that we should go shopping, and then he wouldn't have us in that exact inspired moment when he had something to shoot. So he used to say, are you there? Are you there? And Tony and I would look at each other, yes? Why? I don't know, I just want you there.
Dennis would get in an argument with one of the cameramen. Give me, it's my camera, and he'd go off and shoot without Peter.
We were supposed to be in the parade. If you look at the film carefully, you'll see that we're never in the parade. There's one shot where I'm in the parade.
I could not believe what was going on. And I'm the producer.
A lot of people quit. So they started to come back about the second or third day, and they'd all come by the office and just tell me these horror stories of what happened.
I was taking a shower, I guess trying to wash the day off. It was so amazing. So I got cleaned up and dried off, put on a T-shirt and some jeans and a jacket, and went next door where Karen Black and Tony Basil were bunked together. Picked up Karen's guitar and started playing her songs and, you know, location love. There's a scuffle going on outside. I was drawn to the scuffle, and out there is Barry Feinstein holding his $30,000 three-lens combo Aeroflex. And Barry Feinstein is the Golden Gloves champion. While Dennis is kicking at him and trying to get the camera.
Barry Feinstein and I get in a fight.
We're rolling around and fighting.
I want all the film in my room, and he starts throwing it at me.
The room is full of film.
You worked me, ran me through the streets night and day here, and you're screaming about how Orson Welles had failed and like how you weren't going to fail.
The fight fell into the room with the two girls.
And upside down, Dennis tumbles through the
We go
door.
crashing in through a door where Peter's in bed with Karen and Tony.
Dennis picked up the guitar, it was Karen's guitar, and slammed it over Barry.
Dennis was sitting on him. He was pinned to the floor.
Picked up a television and threw it at Barry.
And Dennis looked at him and he says, and he meant it, I love you, man. Man, I love you.
The whole thing has been like a Rashomon experience. The whole movie, the entire production, everybody's got an entirely different story on the thing.
Terry Southern, a grown-up, someone who can put order in here, someone who can make it pragmatic and workable. So we all had a meeting. Dennis was going, Terry said, I don't think I can bear the cacophony of your speech much longer. Dennis said, the cacophony, huh? The cacophony of my speech, huh? And they were like having these arguments and things, and nothing was decided.
So we started this very badly. This did not start off as some friends now making a movie.
The big schism seemed to have come down in New Orleans. They never were the same after that. And they argued considerably throughout the remainder of the picture. They'd started out great pals, and they didn't end up great pals at all. But they could pretend they were great pals to the outside world, and they did for years. Next year was to get the script done, so now there's a lot of controversy about that, but basically, Terry Southern had been one of the original producers, and Terry ducked out after the New Orleans debacle. So we made a deal with Terry to be one of the writers on the project. We decided to shut down and get a screenplay written and hire a real crew of real people and get kind of professional about the whole thing. We hired a production manager named Paul Lewis.
I had done a series of pictures with Jack Nicholson. Jack and I were talking one time. He says, have I got a thing for you? He said, I've got a great, great picture for you to do. It's a bike picture, and it's with two crazies, but at least you have one guy there who will drink with you.
I didn't think we were doing anything special at all. Dennis always thought we were doing something special.
The movie was like a Western to me. I thought of Wyatt as Wyatt Earp, and I thought of Billy as Billy the Kid. these two thrown together as partners.
For me, it was a Western idiom we were working with. Riding a motorcycle, I'm wearing spurs. I was the Duke, Dennis was Wardo, and we're going across John Ford's America.
It's a couple of guys, and rather than riding horses, they're riding like motorcycles. They camp out around campfires. They're the bad guys. They're outlaws.
If you look at the Wild One, that was the beginning of glamorizing the biker as the kind of fantasy outlaw. And what that did is it created the atmosphere to allow the Hells Angels to become a big gang.
The same time that we were making Easy Rider in 1968, the whole country was ablaze. The Black Panthers were causing riots everywhere, and the cities were burning. We were living in a society that was amoral because we could no longer believe in the mores of the society and that we were all breaking the laws of society.
People wanted change. They wanted us out of the war. They wanted a different kind of life. You know, everybody was giving away acid and the B-ins and the love-ins. Everybody was smoking dope. If you didn't have it and somebody else had it, everybody shared. It was a nice feeling. It all changed, and when hard drugs came in, it became a business.
When hard drugs started to come in, being dealt by people who had absolutely no values whatsoever, that was the beginning of the end of it. When we first started doing mescaline, it came before acid actually, we were just looking for a different take on things.
Because of smoking marijuana and the kind of things that we were doing in the 60s, it seemed like everyone was outside of the law at that time.
The exact producer told us, you can't have heroes who smuggle hard narcotics. Can you do it with grass? And then I looked at Hopper and I said, well, yeah, if we have 3 Peterbilt triple tractor trailers waiting for us.
We couldn't really get that much marijuana on a motorcycle, to make it interesting, money-wise. I changed that to cocaine because heroin had just a bad connotation to it, and cocaine was the drug of kings, and nobody really knew what it was.
I didn't really want to make it a drug you could identify. It was just a white powder. I wanted the moralists in the country to feel whatever was the worst drug for them, that was what this was. And that we would score this in a junkyard in Mexico, scoring junk in a junkyard. Harper loved that thought. He also promised he'd give me real coke. It's a test. Oh man, I'll tell you, powdered sugar really hurts. I had flown into LAX with John Lennon in a Learjet, and looking out the window, I saw this is a public road. And I just thought, this is really wild. This would be a great place to do a scene where it's so much noise, you can't hear what goes on, but you know what's going on.
Planes were landing from 20 feet to 50 feet over our heads almost every minute and a half. And every time a plane went, everybody was ducking down.
There were the planes roaring overhead, roaring, taking off, and at the same time, a train went by, carrying half-tracks and tanks on its way to Vietnam. And I said, mixed media. And we elected not to put the tanks in there because we did not want to make a film about or against any judgment on the war in Vietnam. We got Phil because he had his own Rolls Royce, so we picked up that free, and his own bodyguard, another one we picked up for free. But we ran into some problems because Phil really was scared.
By the end of the day, people were ready to kill each other because you couldn't hear, you couldn't talk to anybody. And the first day of the picture was almost the last day of the film.
One of the first things I did after I talked with Hopper is I drew out the pictures of the motorcycle with the teardrop gas tank. It's extended with the far front end, the 2 big Harley V-twin poppers. Boom, I'm just riding one big phallic down the road.
They weren't motorcycles that you drove back and forth across the country. Nobody tried that, I don't think. There must be some nutcases that did, but no rational human being tried it.
Laszlo Kovacs is the greatest telephoto operator I've ever seen.
Our camera car was hysterical.
What we would do is mount the camera either in a convertible or on the back of a station wagon.
Soft tires, back seats out.
Just some sandbags and an Aeroflex and Laszlo.
ABC Leathers had made 2 jackets and 1 set of pants for me. And I wore the outfit all the time. In fact, I'd gotten a bathtub with pants on and got them all wet and then let them dry with me and my legs bent so they would look like I'd been born in them. So it was a hot day. We'd stop. We're waiting. I'm getting hot in the black leathers. By the time we got to Kingman, we were all going to go out by the pool to have a cocktail. I thought, that sounds cool. got into my room, peeled off the leathers. I had these purple legs from the dye of the pants. I was very embarrassed about my skinniness. I said, I'm not about to go out with skinny purple legs. So I pulled on some clean pants and went to the bar, and I said, bring me the tallest, coldest beer you have. So they came with this big glass stein, frosted at that. And I grabbed it, thinking to myself, shit, man, this is the first day on the road with the movie, you know, my first production. This is wonderful. All these people were all together making this movie. Babbitt picked up the beer, couldn't move to my face. I could pick it up, put it down, but no hinge. So nobody saw that one. I'll wait, and I grab it with the other arm, pick it up, and it won't move. And then I just try without the beer. I can't make my hands move to this part of my body. Because for the entire day, at 25 miles an hour, because you had to see the background, we could not go fast. With my hands up in the air so high, and they're just hanging on, trying to keep this sucker from going over. At faster speeds, it was easy to ride. At slow speeds, it was a major bitch. I couldn't put anything in my mouth. I couldn't even smoke a joint.
We've been smoking since early that morning. What we did was we drove along in 3 Cortezes, and we'd jump out and shoot, get back in the Cortez. And we were diligently figuring out what we were going to say. And of course, it started coming out very serious and very heavy. And by the time we got to where we were going to shoot, which is an Indian burial place, and there were park rangers standing there watching us, they didn't want a pebble moved. We sat there with the camera running, 5 minutes before anybody said anything. We were so loaded, we didn't even know where we were.
Some of the hostilities you'll see between some of the people show in some of the scenes. I think Luke and Dennis may have had some words earlier in the day, and I think you'll see some of the hostilities in the way it was done between the Porky Pig and, certain things. But it really worked for the picture.
It was our first real day off, and we all gathered in the lounge of the Americana Inn in Flagstaff. We put all these round tables out in a circle, and we all were having a good time, and I had my 12-string guitar, and I was singing and playing, and we were having a grand old time till some son of a bitch came out from the real bar, drunk, staggered into the middle of our circle and started saying, you hippies, you fucking hippies, And he's an ex-Marine, and he's thinking, you peaceniks, and he gets on a rant. He pisses off quite a few people on the show, some of them who've been served in Korea. They picked him up, put him outside the circle, and we all thought, that's good enough. And as we all went to sit down again, he pulled Joyce's chair out, Joyce King, our script clerk, and she sat down and fell on the floor. You do not fuck with a film company when they're all together. We picked him up, put him down in the bar as we all went Sig Heiling, Heil, out of this bar and into my room.
The whole company went into Peter's room, everybody, and Peter was sitting there rolling a lot of joints, and everybody sat down, everybody in the company, and including people who had never done grass before. Everybody sort of like smoked and got a little high. It was a nice start for the road trip.
It was hysterical what went down. I can't tell you. I'd be invading people's privacies, but it was absolutely hysterical how that evening ended up, and we bonded beautifully.
The only time I ever had anything to do with communes, they were basically pretty ugly scenes. They were run by usually 2 or 3 guys on a total power trip, total control over some poor chicks that they ran ragged, bunches of children around that weren't being taken care of. But this was a polystyrene commune in the hills of Malibu, so a little different.
We shot the commune in the Malibu Hills here in California, and we had the art director copy almost identically New Buffalo.
We had sent some people down to Topanga Canyon just to pick up hippies wherever we could find them so we could populate this thing more.
When I first come into the commune and I'm fully clothed, and I lean over the wash basin and splash my face and then my armpits, and I've got on a shirt and a jacket. Why would a guy do that? It was just something funny to do. I felt at times the movie was taking itself so seriously that I had to harpoon it.
Peter's character would very likely have maybe stayed in the commune. He seemed to be very happy wherever he was. It was sort of okay, And I'm the one, we got to keep going.
Dennis may be the dark force pulling this thing to a bad end. You could just tell that if he stuck with Billy, he kept on doing what he was doing, that one or both of them were going to wind up dead.
The marching band is America to me. And marching without a permit is something that I knew quite a bit about since I was in the civil rights and trying to stop the war.
So we get in the parade and we get busted for parading without a permit. We had to do that line. You're in the parade or you're not in the parade, right? We're on the bus or not on the bus. As I said, an ACLU type will see it go down and bust us out of jail. Dennis put the ACLU type in jail with us.
Thing in the prison that Jack says about, they're cutting off their hairs with rusty razor blades. If you have long hair, you guys are lucky, Those are things stories that I'd actually heard, that Paul and I had heard about what was going on in Texas and not to go through Texas.
We were running into these young kids with their heads shaved, really beaten badly by Texas police, and they would see us and they would say, "Do not go through Texas, or they're going to catch you, they're going to shave your head, and they're going to kick the shit out of you." We stopped. I bought Dennis a hat, made him tuck his hair under the hat, and he wouldn't do it. He goes, "I'm not going to go this way. I'm going the way I'm going." We'd get to the border. He says, "I'm not going through Texas."
Jack wasn't going to be an actor anymore. I remember he told me that. He said he didn't want to be an actor. I said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "I want to run a studio."
Jack didn't originally want to do the picture. Jack had reached a point where he was not sure he wanted to act anymore.
We had a production assistant whose name was Chris. And Chris could roll a joint better than anybody I ever saw. And somewhere in there, we bought a kilo of marijuana for the picture. The one thing is, there's no time you see anybody smoking any dope in that movie that it isn't dope.
The shooting of that scene was magnificent because I was getting Nicholson loaded, really good pot. This was going on so when it came time to shoot his end of it, he was really ripped.
I couldn't believe that actors could do that. They could get that loaded and still remember to do anything. It was a stunning kind of eye-opener for me.
And Jack went up, laughed his ass off. Well, we cut. Okay, it's a print and a pickup. And Jack starts, no, Des, let me do it from the top, because he had been studying very hard. And Jack's just almost in tears, begging, and the camera's now rolling, slated. And Dennis says, "Okay, Jack." And Jack's, where were we?
In Morganza, Louisiana, in the cafe, it was basically a segregated state, and they had a white section and a non-white section. The best part of the cafe was in the black section because they had great music in there, and they had a great jukebox, and the people were much looser and everything else. Some of our crew went in the back and were dancing to the music and dancing with some of the people who were in that section. That added to the antagonism and added to the hostilities. The sheriff, who was actually in the picture, said, "Either you get him out of there, I'm putting him in jail."
So I arrive at this place, Morganza, Louisiana, this little coffee shop, which is about all there is there. I'd had this location scout go ahead, and he would find actors that might be suitable to be in the picture. And I kept telling him, don't go to little theater groups. I don't want little theater. I want real people, and I'll try to work with them.
Tony had lined up 50 or 60 people.
He had gone to the local little theater group, and he'd gotten a group of actors together who had all dressed up and looked like they were ready to perform. And I went, oh man, this is terrible.
So we arrived before anybody else was there as we walked in. They were standing around them. I could smell them. Can you smell them? Dennis says, "Those guys, we want them."
I said, "I want those guys." And he goes, "You've got to be kidding. I can't ask those guys. They'll kill me." And I said, "Those are the guys I want for the movie." And I said, "You see those little girls over there?" And he said, "Oh my, we're going to get in so much trouble here. We'll never leave this town." I said, "Everybody wants to be in the movie." So they did. They wanted to be in the movies. I told them, "There's nothing you can say that's too bad about us. Feel free to say anything you want about us because we raped and killed a young girl outside of town." Oh. So that freed them up to use all their bigotry and all their stuff and all their nastiness, which they wanted to use anyway. For years I was criticized, "Why didn't you use a black guy on the back of the bike?" Well, why? Because it would be too obvious that there would be a reason for them to kill us at that time because of the racial implications of going into the South. But in point of fact, we didn't need to be different. We didn't need to be black. We just needed to have long hair. And I wanted them to kill one of their own. I wanted America to kill their own son. And when they killed Jack Nicholson, and the worst thing he's done is get drunk and work for the ACLU, which everybody wanted me to take out of the picture, which I thought was really ludicrous at the time. But anyway, that's how uptight everyone was. They didn't object to anything else but that ACLU line. Can't we do something about that?
Jack distills it all. He's our mouthpiece. And he explains it. Dennis is this foil. All they're worried about is our hair. Oh, yeah, they don't like the hair, but don't go tell them they ain't free. And this is what we were seeing in the movie. We're not free. It was tough. But Jack had to die. He was the one person everybody identified with the most. He was a drunk. If anybody had trouble getting with any of our characters at that point, because we were potheads, with Jack's character as a drunk, they can get into the scene, and they're more comfortable with him.
They knew that if he was found dead with his skull crushed, had been seen with these two guys, and those two guys had left the scene, probably the idea would be that those guys did it.
Dennis had found this graveyard, which I found to be rather bizarre, but it worked for me. Everybody's buried above ground in New Orleans. Because you dig 3 feet down, you're in the water.
And we go up the side of the crypt when we take the acid, Peter breaks up the acid and gives it to us, and I say my sensitive line, "Oh, shut up, just take it."
We were going to go to the cemetery and shoot the next day. I said, I don't know if I can sleep tonight. No, we're getting really up early. And so Peter said, take this. Take this, and you'll sleep. So what is it? He said, it's a sleeping pill. Yeah? So I take it, and I sort of feel like I'm lying there trying to go to sleep, and Tony is next to me in the other bed, and she's listening to me, and I'm going, Tony, I know this sounds really strange, but I feel like I can't get in my body. I feel like I can feel the outside of my skin. It feels really cool and cold, and I can't go to sleep because I'm out. I can't get in. So she wakes up in the morning, she says, Karen said the most wonderful things last night. Why doesn't she say them in the movie?
The whole sequence was not scripted. Dennis saw this statue was the Italian Statue of Liberty with me sitting on her lap, asking my mother why she'd copped out on me. Because my mother committed suicide when I was 10. And I said, Dennis, you can't ask me to do that. Just because you know doesn't give you the right to go public with it, especially in a film. I don't feel comfortable doing that. No, man, you've got to, man. I mean, man, you got to, man. Man. I mean, it's, Dennis, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go out there and say that. I don't want to be that public with it. But man, you got to, and we're arguing, and give me one good reason, man, and because I'm the director. I couldn't argue with that. So I got up on the statue, and I went for something I had never done in my life.
That to me was talking to the Statue of Liberty and saying, are you just a piece of paper? Is liberty just a piece of paper? I thought of those things as being symbolic of what was happening in the country.
Barry, who was filming it, could see it through the lens. And I don't know why Dennis wanted to move the camera, but Dennis wanted to move the camera. Barry wanted to let it roll. And I could hear the argument. And finally, I go, shut up! It's in the film.
We'd shot the whole movie, and I said, but there's one more scene that we have to shoot. And he says, no, we've shot the movie, completed the movie. And I get him out in the middle of the night, I said, we're shooting this scene. And he said, well, I'm not saying all that crap.
Dennis started out, I said, what do you want to say, man? Well, I just want to say we blew it. Yeah, it's good. We'll have to say we blew it when we went for the big money, man, We'll say we blew our hairs. No, I just want to say we blew it. And this boiled into an argument, basically with Dennis. It's high level, high decibel.
I said, well, then don't worry about it. You just say we blew it, and I'll say the rest. He said, well, how are you going to do that? I said, don't worry about it.
Dennis and I were at a gas station and found this gentleman with a goiter on his neck, and Dennis said, get me him.
So I said, those are the two guys that I want to do the killing.
He said, but we need somebody with a pickup truck. Do you have a pickup truck? And he said, no, but my friend does. And he points out his friend from the back. And Dennis, yeah, right, get him. So Dennis, we got them both, put them in the car. And, Dennis told them what he wanted to do, basically. Gave them roughly, what they were supposed to say and let them go.
I really wanted to win the Cannes Film Festival. Yeah. And I had enough knowledge to know that superimposers were like frowned on in the European art market. People said, well, that was because they couldn't afford the money that it took to superimpose. But that may be partly it, but I think that superimposure is really cheating, I mean, I think that if you can direct cut something, it's much cleaner.
Dennis had cut together the picture in a very long version. And we'd seen this long version endlessly. And it was too long to ever think about releasing. Dennis wanted to roadshow the movie, which is when you have the intermission, ticketed signed seat and all that. And I kept saying, Columbia isn't going to do that, Dennis. There's not a chance in the world that they're going to roadshow this movie. So at some point, the picture was taken away if you will, from Dennis.
We had to take the film and re-edit it from 3 hours down to a reasonable length film. Jack edited his part of the scene. Hayward edited. I edited. Bert edited. Bob edited.
We'd cut it down from over 3 hours to 90 minutes. And we had a screening for Dennis at Columbia in the big theater. And I just thought he's going to go so nuts when he sees what we've done. You know, he was my brother-in-law, and I liked him, but he had a temper, and I knew this was cutting to his creative soul. And the lights came on, and I was prepared for anything, to be anything from being shot to, it's like, and there was tears in his eyes. And he said, "That's beautiful." He said, "That's amazing. Don't ever, ever let me cut another foot of film."